Hi everyone, we're going to talk a little bit today about what you need to know to do well on your Unit 3 test, which will be this Friday. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to log into the OHS and actually find the test. So let me show you how to do that before we go over what you need to know on the test. Logged in here as a student. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to go over to Instructional Cycle 3. And then you're going to want to go down to week 16, which is this week, and then you're going to want to click on Friday. Under Friday, there is your test. You click it and take it. So that's how you get to the test. Now, what do you need to know to pass the test? Well, let's take a look at this presentation about what is on the test. All right, so the first thing you're going to want to think about is Frederick Douglass and slave narratives, and we talked about that back at the beginning of the 6 weeks. Writers really began to notice the contradiction of slavery in America around this time. America was a country founded on freedom, but it was actively withholding freedom from an entire group of people, and that was starting to raise questions. Slavery began to decline in the northern states because they relied more on manufacturing than they did on farming, like the southern states did. So Frederick Douglass, we read his autobiography, or part of it, the autobiography of Frederick Douglass, and he wrote that to show what life was like as a slave. He wanted slaves, free people, and people from other nations to understand what he and other slaves went through. It was a first-person account. He learned to read and write while he was a slave under the tutelage of Mrs. Auld, who was the wife of his master. Her husband, Mr. Auld, did not like that she was doing that. He reminded her again and again that it was illegal to teach slaves to read and write at that time. So from there we move into modernism, which The Great Gatsby falls under this time period. So some characteristics of modernism is that it was popular through the 1910s to the 1960s. It really came into its own due to the increasing industrialization and globalization, machinery, big factories, that kind of thing. There was factories that were doing work that workers were doing in the city. There was machinery that was being used on farms that was putting people out of work and making them have to move into the cities. So that was going on a lot, especially in the 20s. So this new technology and the horrifying events of both World Wars, World War I and II, but specifically World War I, made many people question the future of humanity, what was happening to the world. And Fitzgerald was one of the writers that responded to this. He wrote The Great Gatsby, and after World War I, which is when The Great Gatsby is set, that really kind of influenced what he was writing about. A lot of the writing at this time spoke of the inner self and consciousness. It saw a decline of civilization, which we see all throughout The Great Gatsby. A lot of times it's written in first person, and there's the use of irony, satire, and comparisons that were employed to point out the problems in society's ills, and The Great Gatsby definitely does that. So let's think about The Great Gatsby a little bit. What are some things you need to know? Well, we have Jay Gatsby. He is our main character. He is in love with Daisy, whom he used to date before he went off to the war. He makes friends with Nick, who is his neighbor, and also Daisy's cousin. He had just moved to West Egg, where Gatsby lives. Gatsby is very wealthy, but he got his money, it seems, almost illegally from bootlegging. When they talk about Meyer Wolfsheim, who's his business associate and really just a big part of organized crime, like a crime boss. And Gatsby throws these lavish parties at his mansion in West Egg, and all of these people come, but they're all very surface. Okay, the parties are just a lot of people dancing, having a good time. There's not a lot of talking, not a lot of interaction. He drives a yellow car, and this car kills Myrtle. Gatsby himself is killed by Tom, who is Myrtle's husband. He thinks that Gatsby was actually the one driving the car when Myrtle was hit. Gatsby dies in his pool. There's a funeral. Almost no one comes except for Gatsby's father, really. Nick is there. That's it. No one else comes. None of the people from the parties, none of that. So then we have Nick. Nick is the novel's narrator, Nick Carraway, and so the story is really told through his eyes, and it's how he sees things. He's Daisy's cousin. He also, like you said, becomes Gatsby's friend, and he admires Gatsby, but he also kind of isn't always sure that Gatsby's telling him the truth, and he also kind of feels sorry for Gatsby too, especially at the end, at the funeral, when no one shows up. He facilitates this rekindling of a romance between Daisy and Gatsby, so because they were once in love. Many of the novel's characters confide their secrets and troubles to Nick, and he becomes romantically involved with Jordan Baker. And she's kind of the representative of the 20s girl in this novel, the short haircut. She's kind of self-sufficient. She's a golfer, but she's also dishonest. She cheats, that kind of thing. But Nick himself sees himself as very honest. So then we have Daisy and we have Tom, and they're married. Now you're thinking, but you said Daisy was involved with Gatsby. Well, that's part of the ills of society that Fitzgerald is shining a light on in this novel. Daisy is Nick's husband and Gatsby's old girlfriend. When Gatsby went off to the war, Daisy waited on him for a while, but then she ended up getting married, and she married Tom. So Daisy and Tom are married, and they live in East Egg. Okay, Gatsby and Nick live in West Egg. West Egg is new money. East Egg is old money. So money is not necessarily money. They both may have a lot of it, but old money is seen as higher society than new money. And so because of that, Gatsby and Daisy are not necessarily in the same class. And Daisy has feelings for Gatsby, but she's definitely more concerned about appearances and money. Then we have Tom, her husband. He's a bully. He's kind of aggressive. They see money as something to just throw away. It doesn't mean anything to them. Neither of them attend Gatsby's funeral, and Daisy is the one driving Gatsby's car when she hits and kills Myrtle. So then we have Myrtle and George Wilson. They're married and they live in the Valley of Ashes. This is the road between East Egg and West Egg. Myrtle is Tom's mistress. Remember we said Tom was Daisy's husband. Myrtle is killed by a hit and run. We just said it was Daisy driving the car. And George thinks Gatsby was driving the car that killed Myrtle, so he shoots him by his pool at his mansion and kills him. So throughout The Great Gatsby, there are tons of symbols, but some of them that we talked about, bad driving and car accidents. Throughout the novel, they talk about the careless driving. There are car accidents. Obviously, Myrtle is killed by a car accident. So this showed the carelessness of the characters in the novel. They kind of just didn't take anything very seriously. Then there was the green light at the end of Daisy's dock, and this represents Gatsby's hopes and dreams for the future, especially the hopes and dreams with Daisy. Then we have the eyes of T.J. Eckleburg. They were on that billboard that kind of stared down. And this, well, at least George, for one, interpreted this as the eyes of God staring down and judging American society as a moral wasteland. But this wasn't ever really made explicitly throughout the novel. It's only brought up when George says it, but that's kind of what's implied. Then we have the Valley of Ashes, and this represents the moral and social decay that results from the uninhibited pursuit of wealth and the plight, and it also represents the plight of the poor. There's all this wealth around them while George and Myrtle, are living basically with nothing. So these are some of the things you want to keep in mind when you are working on your test. Your teachers will also be having a review session. You might want to check that out as well. Good luck. I know you guys will do great.